There you
Hey,
are. I went to the Zoom meeting that was on my, I guess, invite that's automatic. So I was like, wait, we're in empty Zoom
no,
meeting.
it's cool. It's cool. Thank you for joining, first of all. I appreciate your
Yeah,
time.
my pleasure, man. No problem.
So, for the people that are listening, just quickly introduce who you are and what you do, and then we'll dive straight into it.
Cool. So you want me to say it or you're going to say
Yeah, yeah, use it, please. Yeah.
it? All right. Hi, I'm Steve Giralt. I'm a visual engineer, director, DP based in New York City. I do all those crazy TV commercials you see with like the robots and things exploding. And we shoot a lot of slow motion food and beverage work here. Run a production company in New York here called The Garage, where we, shoot really cool stuff.
hmm
Um, on
Yeah,
top of that, we are also starting up a educational platform called The Garage Learning, which will also be teaching the art of what we do. So
yeah,
that's
that's cool. That's very cool. I always ask everyone this because I find it really interesting. So, how did you even get into, well, commercial work or just filmmaking in general? And then, yeah, first of all, I just want to know that how did this even happen?
well, I went to photography school actually first. So I first wanted to be a still photographer. I'm from Miami, Florida originally,
Ah,
and I was only the only photography I was exposed to was like wedding photography. That's what I thought a photographer did, or you shot for like the swimsuit edition of like Sports Illustrated. But after high school, I started taking pictures for like a yearbook photo studio because I just love photography and I was kind of the geeky kid in high school with like the camera around his neck everywhere he went. And then I transferred to Rochester Institute of Technology in upstate New York, where I learned advertising photography, and that kind of sent me on the crazy path to where I am today, where I graduated from there. I moved to New York City. I worked as a photo assistant and digital tech for a few years. And then I went off to start shooting, for magazines and catalogs and advertising. And I kind of did that for, I don't know, 10, 12, 13 years, something like that. And then only just about 4 or 5 years ago, I switched into video where I kind of was like, hey, I'm kind of done with just doing stills. I could do so much more. Like I had these hobbies and passions for like electronic circuits and welding and woodworking and making
yeah.
furniture and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, how do I bring that into my work with like
hmm
photography, the things I do? And that's kind of where visual engineering was born, where I was like, hey, let me bring all this like love for engineering and technology I have in with like this excitement to explore filmmaking and cinematography. And I basically, the rest was all kind of self-taught and I kind of got here somehow.
That's such an interesting transition because I thought you was doing video for ages, considering looking at your work. It's like spectacular. So, how did you find that transition moving from photos to video?
It was challenging and exciting in both ways. I mean, I think as on the business side of it, it was definitely challenging because I was basically closing one business in a lot of ways and then starting a new one. So there was definitely a gap year in there where I was just like, like the photo people weren't hiring me as much anymore, but the video people weren't quite hiring me as
Yeah.
much yet. So it was kind of a little rough. But no, I mean, for me, I think so many traits between still photography and cinematography carry over, lighting and composition and those aspects of how you do visual storytelling. I think still photography, you kind of master like one beautiful frame and you really massage the lighting and you have kind of a really great attention for detail.
hmm
And also you learn how to light things without seeing it because you use flashes and strobes. So it's like you kind of can imagine light in a different way than a traditional cinematographer that was always used to seeing it through the camera and through,
Yeah.
with his eye. So some things were easy. The hardest part was like video post production, editing, how to shoot multiple cameras, different angles, how to tie the edit together. Like that definitely took. At the beginning, I was like, what's the difference between 23.98 and 24 and 30 and 29.9 whatever? And like I'm just like I don't know. I just would take one still at a time. So no, there was definitely a lot of learning on like what a video editor could bring to it, what a sound designer could bring to something, what
Yeah.
how to tell the story that way. But a lot of the stuff in the work that we do, it doesn't have sound on set, so that was a little easier because we're usually shooting all slow motion. So yeah, some things were easy, some things were challenging, but
Yeah.
it was fun either way.
And what was the first like project in terms of video that you did that kind of put the foot into the dog shit? Like I say, you worked very different. So what was that first project where it was like, you know, the major switch in terms of the video work?
Well, yeah, I mean, I started doing some really tiny video projects for like some of the clients I already was working for as a still
Yeah.
photographer, but those were just like not monumental by any means. I think the one job that really, or the one video I did, which was like the burger drop, which is like all the layers of the burger kind of come together, was truly my like, oh wow, this is like real, and that was just a personal production. Like that was a test that I did.
Yeah.
I had never shot with a Phantom camera before. I never shot with a camera robot before. I'd never done any of this stuff before, but I like foresaw what I wanted to do, and I started testing and playing around and figure out like, oh, okay, this is how it kind of works.
Yeah.
And this is a testament to the kind of person I am, which is just like, oh, I haven't done it, but let me try to figure it out. And by banging my head against the wall long enough, eventually I'll get through the wall and kind of figure it out. And no, and once again, I was like, oh, let me share the behind the scenes of this. And that's really what brought me onto the scene, was just like, it went viral like everywhere, like, you know, on Reddit, on the front page and all this stuff, and, you know, in Gadget, and all these people wrote articles, and it was really about the behind the scenes, like showing the fact that like I went through the trouble of not doing CGI, but actually doing it in camera and using these crazy robots. And once again, to me, that's everything in the work that we do, is all about authenticity in the food that we create, and that appetite appeal of like a real thing. Even though people love to go back and forth on social media arguing that all my stuff should just be done CGI, you know.
It's crazy, isn't it? It's crazy. So did you go to engineer, like, did you study engineering or all that? Because I know you do a lot of engineering in your work.
No, not officially. I am not officially an engineer. My dad was an engineer. My brother is a computer engineer. My uncle was an engineer. My grandfather was an engineer. You know, so like I definitely had it in my blood. We were the family that didn't call a repairman for anything. Like somebody would come and take the thing apart. We would like get the multi-tester and like check it out and fix it. Go to Radio Shack which was like a thing back in the day. But so yeah, it's funny enough. Yeah, I don't have an actual like formal engineering training at all, even though we run with crazy robots and mechatronics and electronic, you know, like, yeah, we do all sorts of different types of engineering, but not trained. It's applied engineering, we'll call it.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So when did you, obviously I know you've been doing videos for quite a while now, but when did you start really introducing engineering into your videos and incorporating it? Was it straight away, or was it a gradual thing?
Yeah, it was right from the beginning of when I went into the burger drop and doing that, which, I mean, like before that I had like played with like a red camera and done some like slight slow motion stuff at 120 frames or something, and played with food and pours by hand. And once again, I had to get my feet wet and kind of understand it a little bit. But I was like, oh, tap, the water's good. Let me, you know, I dove right in off the highest diving board pretty much after that. But yeah, no, it was pretty much, well, it was out of necessity too. It's not like, oh, I want to be an engineer. It was just more like, oh, if I want this to happen and then this to happen and this to happen precisely one after the other in, you know, 0.1 millisecond time, like accuracy, I need to figure out how to have a machine do this stuff. And it was that drive was just driven by the creative. Like I wanted to do a creative thing, but then I had to figure out the technical side of how to do it, you know, so that's where that, and, you know, and obviously the ability to do that is a little unique, but you know, whatever.
And how does it work? Do you like form an idea around your engineering, or do you just like come with an idea and then decide to do the engineering to try fix it?
Yeah, it's usually, you know, because in traditional science in the world, you have like scientists and you have engineers. You know, the scientist is the one that's like, I want to go to the Mars or the moon. And the engineers are the one like, we can't do it. It's impossible. You know, like, so I say I'm like the science and the engineering inside my head when I'm trying to come up with an idea where, you know, first and foremost, I'm the scientist that's like, I want to go to the moon, or I want to do this crazy shot where we orbit around some liquid or whatever. And then the next stage is like, oh, how do we actually do that? Can we do that? I'm unique in that, like, I could think through both sides of it simultaneously, where most people might only be the creative or might be only the execution side of things. To me, you know, what you know, fires it all off to start is usually now like the brand, you know, and the brand story, the product, this, whatever the story is that we're trying to tell, whether it's like, oh, this is fizzier, or this is more juicy, or this is, you know, or this is cold and refreshing, or strawberry, or whatever it is. That idea drives my thought process first on like, how do I tell a story about that thing uniquely in my own way, in an impactful way that makes sense. You know, because I think a lot of people just like blow shit up just for the purpose of blowing things up. Like I think purpose is a big part in my process and should be very important. So I do that first, and then the engineering side comes in, where it's just like, oh, if we built a thing that had like this thing and we put air into it or whatever, like, can we actually get that idea to come through in reality using, you know, physics and gravity and the real world that we live in?
That's so interesting. Did you like, was you so good at science in school, or was it, does it just come
I was
naturally?
always good at math and science. Yeah, I definitely like math and science. Yeah.
It's got to be embedded.
Yeah.
So what's the time frame in terms of making these projects? Because I can imagine it being quite time consuming, especially when you have to
You
create.
know, you would think so, but it's amazing. The rate, we're really, you know, slave to our clients, and our clients' timelines have just gotten faster and faster because the world that we live in is just like, oh, you have to react to stuff and you got to get ads up quick and, you know, whatever it is. So no, I mean, I think on the longest side is like we start talking about a job and we finish a job in like a month timeline. That's like the furthest. It could be as quick as like, hey, we got reached out by like Pepsi today. They want to shoot like next week, you know, and like that happens more than we might like, you know, and we're like, you know, for me, I always like to have a week to ideate on like the idea, what I want to do, then start executing it. So obviously going from start to execution in a week doesn't allow for that to happen. Usually need a few days to build a set or a machine or something, or, you know, sometimes we already have the things we need. But yeah, I would say the average is probably like 2 weeks from when we start talking about a project till we finish it. Yeah, and that's where like people are like, oh, but you could do it in CGI or whatever. I'm like, yeah, CGI is gonna take you 4 to 6 weeks to do that right. So like, you know, there's something to be said about, you know, being able to do things in reality.
100%, and it's way more better if you do it practically. Like,
maybe not. You know, depending on what it is, right?
Yeah, I guess Interstellar was one of those films that kind of wanted to do a lot of practical things as well. So I think that kind of showed people that, you know, CGI isn't everything. So
and I think there's a nice middle ground between the two of them too, where you're seeing more and more things being shot on like Mandalorian and like virtual sets. Like some things are real, some things are fake, you know. And I think finding the right balance of that is what really makes sense. I think just doing things practically for the sake of doing them practically is cool, but it might not always be the best end result. So I think, you know, once again, we're doing some jobs coming up that are like, we're shooting practical elements and then CGI is going to be kind of wrapped around it, you know. So at the end of the day, it's like what tells the story the best way, in the most unique way, you know. Like people like in Gravity, where they use like TV screens to like project the light from what the CGI world was going to be on them, is like a nice mix too, where it feels really real. You're still shooting real people, but the environment is kind of this hybrid. You know, I think that's going to be really popular for the next, you know, 5 years, 10 years or so. It's kind of like in between, and then who knows what's going to happen.
Exactly. It's technology is advancing so quick. I just want to ask, like, how do you pitch these ideas then to companies? Do you end up like coming up with your idea and then pitching it, or do they come to you and then you pitch back? And like, as I'm just,
it depends. I mean, like, so traditionally speaking, where there's 2 people that generally hire us, there's like direct to a brand like Nike or Apple or whatever it is, and then there's through the ad agency, which is, you know, 2 very different approaches. You know, because then they're hired by Apple or whatever to be, you know. So when we work direct to brand, we tend to be more creative director and production and execution, all that. So they might say, hey, Steve, here's a shoe. Like, what would you do with this shoe? And then I'll pitch my ideas to them of like, oh, these are like 2 ways we could go with this. But with agencies, traditionally speaking, they come to us with like a very basic framework of a storyboard or idea, and then we do a treatment on that, on like how we would approach their idea and like where we would take it a little further or not, you know, and kind of push the limits a little bit. And that's, you know, once again, that part of the process is really important, but also takes a lot of time and mental energy. And, you know, trying to kind of, not just spit back at them what they spit at you, like, but like actually take what they gave you and like twist it around a little bit, and change it up, and give it back and in a better form than it came.
Yeah. So how, like, in terms of production, how many people are usually on set to help out and, get the things done?
In COVID, it's been different. So, in COVID, we've done quite a few shoots with, 4 people, 5 people on set. That's it,
Mhm.
and maybe 2 or 3 robots. But, they don't get COVID so far, as we could tell. Before COVID, it was still pretty tight. Like once again, we like to run a tight crew and not have a
Mhm.
lot of extra people, just because it gets really crammed, in our space. But maybe, anywhere from, the average shoe would probably be 10 to 15, and upwards to 20 or 30 if it's like a huge production, but
Yeah.
not like 100 people like a lot of regular TV productions might have.
Mhm.
So,
That's
at
still
a
a
really
lot
good,
of people.
yeah, that's a lot of people. Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about, have you ever done anything that's solo? Because I know you've obviously got a production team now, but before when you first started doing the video work, did you start off solo, or did you already immediately have a production team?
Well, since I started in still photography, I didn't have a production team, but I had, a space and a studio and, a
Mhm.
production person that would help me through that. But I didn't have a big team at all. Like I was just mostly me doing all the work,
Yeah.
um, you know, on the burger drop, it was pretty much me, the guy running the robot, and the guy running the Phantom. And that was pretty much it, and a food stylist that just did the burger stuff, so it was like very tight at first until, once again, the client's demands as you get further along, they want more shots in a day, they want more shots, they want more complicated shots. So you need more people to be able to do that. In COVID, I did one day of a shoot for Budweiser that was just me and a food stylist, and that brought it way back to the beginning. Actually, out of my house, we did this like burger flip on a barbecue with fire and some other burger food related things. And it's like I was doing everything. I was running the Phantom, I was doing the lighting, I was doing the, like the rigging, like all the
Awesome.
stuff. So I still got it, but no, to be most efficient, you need, definitely specialists that are good. That, when we look at a team, it's not just like a bunch of people that do the same stuff. We want people
Mhm.
that are specialists in certain areas, like a really good grip or gaffer or rigger or robot operator or Phantom operator, so that, together we could be as efficient as possible and get
Yeah.
as much done in a day as, or 2 or whatever that we have on a shoot.
Mhm.
Um, Nowadays, clients are trying to, squeeze as much as they can in.
Yeah.
Um, but compared to, that's one thing too, is like we're not union, we're a non-union. I'm
Yeah.
not a DGA director, so our rules are a little different than, union productions. I've considered joining the union, but for me, I see the amount of non-union work being way bigger than union work going to the future. So, and in tabletop, I don't think it necessarily makes sense. I see very much where it makes sense in big talent and shoots and, big
Mhm.
locations or backlots, or where, safety and process and are way more important.
100%. And this is a bit of a personal question, but is, when you're looking for a production team or people to hire, you tend to always go for someone that you get on with rather than the expertise, or do you always hire them for the expertise rather than who they are
It
as a
needs
person?
to be a little bit of both, and it depends on the position too. I mean, a lot of the people that work here now are full-time people,
Yeah.
are in some ways self-trained or trained as part of our process. Like we get people that aren't like, we like nobody that's full-time here, like we hired them as like this big expert. It was always like everyone's kind
Yeah.
of learned together. But when we do hire out other freelance crew members, it's a mix. I mean, we believe strongly that the team vibe and like everything should mesh really well, because if we're
Mhm.
going to be working, 10, 12, 14, 15, 16, 20 hours a day together with these people, we got to really get along with them.
Yeah.
Obviously, but not to the point where like they can't do what we need done to the level that we need it done.
Yeah.
I
Of
think
course.
it should be a balance of both. Like I'm definitely not one to hire like, oh, this guy's like the very best gaffer in the whole world, so you should hire him. If he's like not very nice, like no, like yeah.
Of course. Yeah, that's just a general question I thought I'd ask because I find it very interesting. And I have the same exact, response to that. Um, in terms of finding originality, because I know this this industry can be so like same, and it is hard to find originality because a lot of things have been done now. So how do you find originality or stay original with your work? Like, is there a routine, or is it just something that comes naturally? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it's part of that process when we start talking to a client or an agency on like my what I bring to the table on every single job is like, how do we do this different? Like that's like
Mhm.
that's at the core principles of what we do and how I believe we should approach commercials specifically is just like yes, 8 out of 10% of like 80% of this might be similar to what has been done before, but how do we really make that 20% make them stand out of what is new or innovative or different about how we tell the story? Um, like I would love to get like asked by like a Red Lobster or like one of these like fast casual chains that's done their food commercials like the same for the last
Yeah,
20 years to be like, hey, well, how do you do our thing? Because I mean, I think it would be hard as hell to like think outside the box and bring that to one of those campaigns. But that's what we live for. Was like, how do we tell that story differently? How do we, like the first thing I kind of do with a concept is I kind of like take it apart, take its pieces, and kind of look about like how do I look at those pieces differently and put them back together to tell a compelling new story.
yeah.
But no, that's I think the hardest part. I think it's easy enough to copy other stuff that's been done, and my stuff gets copied like crazy, and people out there probably think that I'm copying them. Who knows? But um, it's one thing to do it and believe that it's original to yourself, and it's another thing to know that you're copying somebody else.
Yeah. A lot of your work is original, to be fair. Even was it the 7-Eleven? The recent one
uh
that you've done? That was pretty unique. I never seen that before. That was pretty
That
dope.
was pretty awesome. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was a fun one. That was a COVID job too.
Yeah, really. Was that a small crew as well?
Yeah. Very small. We added like two more because they were the set builders, but
Yeah.
otherwise it was a very tight crew. Yeah.
And what was just picking at your brain now? What was the thought process for that project? Did you always want it to be? I'm pretty sure it's the one take all the way throughout, right?
Yeah. So I mean, that was interesting. Where it's actually good to talk about this a little bit. That I am a director, but I'm not always the director on the jobs that we do. So on 7-Eleven, I was not the director. I was the technical DP. So the director is somebody that normally works more in animation and CGI. That's his kind of background in directing. So that's where the idea side of it came from. Him and the agency 360i that was on that job. So they did that whole back and forth amongst themselves, and then they brought me into the picture on like, how do we actually execute this? How do we actually, we know we could do it in CGI, but how do we do this for real? Because we want the drinks to be real. We want,
Yeah.
all that stuff. So it's, once again, it's always a team effort where, once again, when I saw it, I was like, do we really need to build this whole set, or can I just shoot the drink on green screen or on white background or something, and then the rest will be CGI? And they're like, no, they were really adamant about shooting it all for real. And I was like, great, like I would love to do that.
Yeah.
But with that comes a disclaimer where I'm like, unlike CGI where you could put a light anywhere you want, or you could like fake lighting, we're tied into a world of real lighting and
Hmm.
real scale. And as long as you're cool with that, like, awesome, let's do it. I was so game to do a job like this and make sure that, that we got, once again, like a previs from the director, but then obviously we brought into the game also like, oh, like how about the camera moves a little differently, like kind of what a DP normally does, right? Like he's the one that really is going to kind of oversee the visual creation of the idea, the story, So that was really fun, where I got to be just a technical DP. I mean, that was a huge job. I mean,
Hmm.
just like
It
from the
looks it.
agency, they probably had like 30 people on it from the agency, and then like the director and their production and our production, and but like it was this, but yet like it was this tiny team here in my studio that was actually doing the actual execution.
Hmm.
So it's really interesting now with so much more being remote, how at the end of the day, it still lies on me. Like the end result there was like on us to be able to pull this thing off, no matter how many other people were involved. So,
Yeah.
um,
Oh, you did it.
where, yeah, where other jobs, obviously as a director, then like I'm the one interfacing with the client and doing that side of things.
No.
But it's kind of nice sometimes to not have to do that side of it and just really concentrate on the art and the magic.
I've tend to find that a lot of creators do kind of switch back and forth with what they do in terms of the sectors. So one of it directing a 1 minute, and then there might be the editing the next. What do you tend to do the most?
I mean, I'm definitely, for the most part, I'm definitely directing the
Yeah,
most. But I also, whenever I direct, I'm also DP. So I guess you could say I'm technically DP the most because I'm always a DP.
yeah,
Sometimes I'm also a director. So um, yeah, I mean, and I think they're both fun. And either way, even if I'm just a DP, it's usually a very open partnership with whoever the directors are, as
yeah,
far as like how do we actually, because I'm usually the like grounded in reality person, and I'm usually dealing with a really big idea director kind of people that are used to the CG world, or a kind of a different way of thinking.
yeah.
At least the ones that usually come to me. Otherwise, I usually just get hired directly.
Okay. So kind of wrapping it up a little bit now. I want to know your inspirations, like what inspires you or does inspire you to continue doing what you're doing and finding this niche of yours, or just people you look up to in general.
Yeah, I mean, I love film and movies and cinema. Like, I think I could sit through Inception or Gravity or any of these, or even smaller films, and just find inspiration from things. And honestly, I think I'm just an observer of the world. Like, honestly, I think everywhere I go, I'm looking at light, I'm understanding, I'm looking at, the world around me, and I draw inspiration. Could be just walking down the street and seeing something, or, and also I'm weird in that, like, I might get inspiration, like walking down the hall at like a home improvement store, like Home Depot or whatever, where I'm like, oh, look at this pipe thing. We put water in that, and then we did this and air. So, I mean, sometimes the ideas do come backwards from the technology side of things,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I'm always drawing inspiration everywhere I can, and I think seeing other great work also inspires ideas.
Hmm.
Instagram is full of amazing
Yeah.
content and also a lot of crap, but but once again, I think there's some people that are doing amazing stuff
Yeah.
out there, and I definitely respect my peers that are pushing the envelope in the same way we are. And that's a lot of why we share behind the scenes, is like we want to share that in a community with other creators around the world, in the hope that they're going to make, like, I'm going to inspire them to make better work, and they're going to inspire me to make better work, and we're all going to
Mhm.
kind of make better work together, versus like, I'm going to keep all my secrets like hidden in here, and then you
Yeah.
can't have them, and
Yeah.
and those are kind of the two views usually on it. But
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that we did uniquely when I came on the scene, with visual engineering and all that, was also, is right as Instagram was really kind of blowing up, and the work that we make is just born for that. It's just really made for this like eye catching, excitement, shareable kind of thing. So I mean, I think that might have been a little luck, at the beginning of, but we went from like 10,000 followers to like 100,000, like that.
Yeah.
And then like now it's crazy. It's like, well,
Well, the work speaks
every
for
day,
itself. So
yeah. And now we start on TikTok too, and that's been interesting to see how completely different that crowd and algorithm is and all that stuff.
yeah, TikTok
Um,
is such a weird app, such a crazy
yeah.
app.
And I mean, it's interesting too that now we're like, back in the day, like if you went back 20 years, like the only way you would get the work that I do now is I would be part of a production company that had a rep that would go to the ad agency and knock on the door and try to sell their directors, and then they would go into the agency and they would pitch it, and it was this whole like, all these people you had involved, that then
Mhm.
the rep to the producer to the art director to the creative director. And then now it's like that creative director goes on Instagram, finds my work, messages me directly, and it's just like, bing, like we connect. And I think that's really amazing. And the fact that like the access to people like me and creatives that do an amazing job, and I could just say, hey, find them on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever, and just say, hey, dude, your work's amazing. And they could actually write back and be like, yeah, dude, your work's amazing. Like, I reached out to another influencer type guy the other day that I really respect his work and his, you know, digital, mastery. And once
Yeah,
again, we had a conversation, and it's just like mutual respect for each other and the work that we do. And I think that's kind of really exciting that we can do that, and
100%.
before, like, everybody was in their own little bubble. And I think that's definitely changed.
I think Instagram's definitely helped with that. It's kind of like a photography slash filmmaking hub where a lot of us can connect. And obviously, I message you through Instagram as well. So this wouldn't
Right.
have happened if it weren't for social media. So I just want to wrap it up now with the final question, and that's to everyone that's listening. Any advice for people that are coming up, including myself, to commercial work or any other work in the filmmaking industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, I have a lot of advice, but I'll try to summarize a little bit of it. I mean, I think at the end of the day is like, it's really all about your passion, your perseverance, and willing to put in the work, put in the time, really work on your craft. And I think, that's one thing that I think a lot of people are like, I can't do that, or I can't do that. And they kind of get in their own way. And I think if there's anyone that proves the fact that like I didn't know any engineering, I didn't know anything about robots, I didn't know all this stuff, I didn't go to a school for it either. And like the fact that if you just kind of put your head to it and you kind of bang away and you truly follow your passion and your art, and you have that art be the reason for trying to do this for commercials, not just to make money. Like, I think it's really important that you truly, honestly are true to yourself and what drives you and what you're passionate about. Otherwise, the guy that is truly honest and passionate about it is always going to beat you out, even if you drop your prices lower. I think, try to not make it about costs as much as possible, but value yourself. So it's kind of like, I think too many people give things away way too long. I think at the beginning you're going to do a little bit of that, but I think, understand your value as an artist and as a creator, and make sure that every job you get from any sort of client, that you're so thankful for it, and you realize that how blessed you are to have that person believe in you with their $500 or $500 million budget, whatever it is. Like, the fact that you get to do the work that you love doing, and they're embracing their trust in you. I think you need to realize that you owe it back to the world to be thankful and to put that energy forward to the next generation too, and realize that this is a very long game that we're in. It's one thing to have 2 or 3 years where like, woo, look at that, I made all this money, it's great. But then what are you going to do for the next 30 years? Like, you have to really concentrate on the long game and realize it's a lifelong pursuit of passion and perfection, and realize that as long as you're learning a little something every day, it's okay. Like, you're not going to get to the Scorsese level overnight. There's a reason why, most of those huge Hollywood directors are in their 50s and 60s, because they've been at this for a while to build their craft and to understand what storytelling really means, and how it could play an important role in the world, whether it be making a film or a commercial for a brand. But for me, I love commercials so far. Not to say 10 years from now I might want to get into longer form content or whatever it is. I just want to be challenged. I just want to innovate, and that's what drives me is that challenge to overcome traditional ideas and kind of blaze my own trail, even if it might be a little more painful for me than going the traditional route or doing it the way everything has always been done. So I think challenging the status quo is good. Just have an understanding of history and why it was done a certain way before you just start doing it your own way, I think. Yeah, all that advice. There you go.
That was a strong advice there. That is very and that's something I stick by as well. That's literally a bang on. That was awesome.
Cool. Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for joining. I appreciate your time so much because I know you're busy. So yeah, again.
It's all right. My pleasure. I hope anybody that watches this, enjoys it, and, follow us on Instagram, and, follow along as we launch our Garage Learning. We're going to be doing the Kickstarter in October to raise money to do a really full out, awesome educational platform teaching, visual engineering and everything that goes around with it, so awesome.
The links will be in the description, so check it all out.
Awesome. Thanks so much, man.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Take care.